Reuters recently published a special report claiming that Tesla has rigged the algorithms in their vehicle software to display rosy range estimates on the dashboard readout, and that Tesla has even organized a special team who is tasked with canceling range-related service appointments. In this video, I want to discuss some of the highlights of this report and then get to the truth on this issue. I'm John, and this is Cleanerwatt. This report was published by Reuters on July 27th. And in this report, it claims that Tesla, sometime around 10 years ago or so, designed their algorithms, the ones that actually calculate range for the range meter, to show really rosy projections for the available range in the vehicle. However, do notice that this is, quote, according to a person familiar with an early design of the software for its in-dash readouts. I'll talk more about the reasons of this, and this is not a reason to completely discount this altogether. However, here at the start of this, I did want to point out, based on this, that really the basis for this whole thing about Tesla rigging and writing software to show these rosy projections, this is really based on data that may be really old. This may not be the case anymore. Even if it is true, this is something from an early design. So I don't know what that means, but if this was 10 years ago, we're talking like early Model S days. So this is really potentially based on something that maybe isn't even true today. But nonetheless, I do want to follow along with what's in this report because there are some things that are important to point out. But once again, I don't believe this shows that Tesla is rigging anything or cheating any system. So let's move on through this report. Now, apparently this source relayed that beyond just the rosy projections at first, when a vehicle dropped below a 50% state of charge, apparently Tesla's algorithm would switch to a more realistic projection of the range. I don't personally know if that's still the case, but if you drive a Tesla vehicle right now, and you would vouch for this being a thing, I would love to hear from you in the comments section below if you believe that still is the case. At one point in this article, once again going back to what I just previously talked about this potentially being of a very early design, the author of this article wrote, quote, Reuters could not determine whether Tesla still uses algorithms that boost in-dash range estimates, but automotive testers and regulators continue to flag the company for exaggerating the distance its vehicles can travel before their batteries run out. I'll come back to the automotive testers and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But nonetheless, once again, Reuters could not confirm that this was still the case. And once again, going back, it was based on an early design. Apparently, in response to this, as this author writes here, Tesla decided to specifically create a specific team that was tasked with canceling range-related service appointments. When it comes to why these service appointments would be logged by customers, it comes down to the fact that maybe they expected the full EPA range in their vehicle, even when driving on the highway, for instance, or driving in the winter. Or they just believe that their battery might be going bad because maybe they're not getting quite the range that they expect. But once again, we'll go back to EPA numbers and what those estimates mean. But those EPA estimates are not for situations like driving on the highway. They're not for situations when you're driving in the cold or if you like to accelerate a lot very quickly. But nonetheless, it makes sense that if Tesla knows that these service appointments are really just due to confusion about this, it would make sense for them to go ahead and cancel these appointments and not waste customers' time and waste their time. In this case, and I believe this article mentions this, but generally what Tesla does is they will do a remote diagnostic of the customer's battery, and they'll be able to tell the customer that there's nothing wrong with your battery. So Tesla can check the battery remotely and make sure that the battery's actually okay, and then they can cancel an appointment. And that can save them a lot of time and backup here, and once again, save the customer time as well. To support what the author is trying to convey here, they then reference something that happened in Korea, where Tesla was fined by regulators there in South Korea for not stating on their website specifically that electric vehicles during cold weather lose quite a bit of range. And this is something that regulators there in South Korea believed that Tesla wasn't really doing effectively. But nonetheless, all cars lose range during the winter months. Even internal combustion engine vehicles have less range in the cold. This is a topic that I actually dedicated a full video to, how much range Tesla's vehicles lose in the wintertime. But using data from fueleconomy.gov, apparently the average gasoline car's gas mileage goes down about 15% at 20 degrees Fahrenheit as compared to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. And for short trips, it can go down as much as 24%. Now, recurrentauto.com put up this chart in a past article where they showed the average winter range loss for several of Tesla's vehicles, and they have other electric vehicles here as well. And you can see here, based on their data compared to some of these other vehicles, that the winter range loss of Tesla's vehicles, which they say here is freezing, so 32 degrees Fahrenheit versus 70 degree temperatures, you can see here that Tesla is not unique in this, and the range loss is actually better in many cases to the competitors. So range loss during the winter is once again not a Tesla thing. It's not even just an electric vehicle thing. Electric vehicles do lose more range during the winter than internal combustion engine vehicles, but electric vehicles in general lose range during the winter. So this is not like some kind of scandal, some kind of scam. This is just the nature of electric vehicles. The author of this article then went on to write about data from a study that was made by Recurrent, which gathered data in 2022 and in 2023 from more than 8,000 Tesla vehicles here. And according to the data that was gathered here, the dashboard range meters of the Tesla vehicles, when it came to the range that was placed there, that range was not adjusted by condition, hot, cold, etc. However, the author did go on to point out the fact that when it comes to Tesla's navigation system and the range that is estimated there, that did take into account factors like weather. So it's more accurate. Now, when it comes to the reason the author gives for Tesla wanting to have more rosy projections for the range, the author claims that this is something that came directly from Elon because he wanted to show good range numbers. But really what we have here is we have two different range numbers and really two different approaches at calculating this. And this is actually something that's very logical. And this is probably how I would design it if I was in Tesla's place. So you have the main range indicator there at the top. So when you charge your vehicle and it's fully charged, you see the fully charged range there. That is based on EPA cycle data. And that number is represented by the battery management system, which does take into account factors like battery health. So you have that number there. However, when it comes down to what really matters and when you want weather and things like that to be factored in, that's when you go to the navigation, the in-navigation estimates there, because those are way more important when it comes to actually figuring out how many miles are left on a trip. And so you just got to know how to use these tools here. It would make sense that Tesla would want that main number to be representative of the EPA figures and the number in the navigation system to be representative of the weather and other factors. What I would recommend for users is just to switch that main number to a percentage and then use your navigation system when range really matters and you really need to maximize and plan that out, because I believe that's the best way to use this. And then it won't really matter that much. But I think the general public is going to think that they have a battery problem if they charge the car to 100% and they don't see near the EPA rating. For comparison, the author of this article goes on to mention the fact that some of the competitors like the Ford Mustang Mach-E, the Chevrolet Bolt, the Hyundai Kona, etc., the range estimates there and that main indicator seem to be more accurate in those vehicles based on the test done by Recurrent. With that being said, this report also brings up the fact that often in tests, Tesla's EVs don't get quite as high of real-world numbers as their EPA ratings. The author of this report points to the fact that when it comes to vehicle makers, they have the option to use a standard formula provided by the EPA, or they can do more tests and come up with their own range estimate. Apparently, by doing your own test, which once again is something that the EPA is fine with, you can get a little bit higher number. And this is something that Tesla likes to do in order to have a little bit higher EPA number. But apparently some other brands don't do this, and not doing it, just going by an EPA formula, apparently allows you to have a more conservative range estimate. The author also points out that based on data that was able to be obtained from the EPA, Tesla generally is asked by the EPA to lower the actual stated range from their test by a few percentage points, on average here 3%. So what Tesla is simply doing is just using an option that the EPA gives them. And the EPA still approves those figures and apparently commonly has Tesla drop those numbers by a few percentage points. When it comes to automotive testers and some of the results, commonly you'll see tests and they'll say Teslas don't get their EPA rated range. And one of the ones that has been pointed to in the past was an Edmunds test performed back in 2021. Edmunds tested a lot of electric vehicles and found that some electric vehicles got more than the EPA rated range in their test, and some got less, including Tesla's vehicles. Now, these numbers aren't extremely less, as you can see. Here are a few examples that I've pulled from their data. We're talking about a difference here for the 2021 Tesla Model 3 long range, with the EPA stated 353 miles and Edmunds test revealing 345 miles. So this isn't some drastic drop here of EPA test versus Edmunds test, but nonetheless, there is a little bit of a drop there. However, after that test in March of 2021, Edmunds put out another article on this topic, saying that Tesla had reached out to them and really kind of challenged their test because for the Edmunds test, they had not run the vehicles all the way till they stopped driving. They just ran them to when the indicator said 0%. And Tesla's vehicles, like many vehicles, do have a buffer there. And you can go beyond that buffer. It's not recommended, but technically speaking, you can go beyond that buffer. Tesla puts that buffer there to help protect the battery life and to keep people from getting stranded. But nonetheless, Tesla recommended that they go and they drive them all the way till they stop driving. And when Edmunds did that, they were able to find out that two of Tesla's vehicles, the 2021 Model 3 long range and the 2020 Model S Performance, did meet their EPA range estimates in their test by driving them all the way to the point when they completely stopped. However, they said the rest of the vehicles, the other 6 vehicles they tested, were still a little bit below their EPA figures. So really, to wrap all this up, there is no rigging and there is no scandal here. Tesla is following the rules and they have chosen to represent the best case scenario for the EPA range testing. I don't fault them for this. And also when it comes to the so-called rosy projections for the range estimate in the vehicle, there is the in-vehicle navigation once again that is more accurate. And I believe that's the appropriate place, in my opinion, the in-vehicle navigation to have factors like weather, etc., to be taken into account. Do let me know what you think about all this in the comments section below. Do you agree with me or do you disagree with me? I'd love to hear from you either way. And also, I want to say a special thank you to all of those of you who support me through Patreon. Your support makes a big difference and really does help make these videos possible. If you'd like to find out more about how you can support my work through Patreon, I will put a link in the video description. Thank you so much.